The notification appeared on my phone at 3 hours, while I was running pre-flight checks on my F-35 Lightning Roman II at Nellis Air Force Base. It was a news alert from my hometown paper in Cedar Falls, Iowa. My grandmother, Alina Hayes, had passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 87. I sat in the cockpit, my hands trembling against the controls that had never failed me in 43 combat missions. Grandma Alina was gone, the woman who taught me to build paper airplanes when I was 5, who stood on her front porch waving every time I flew overhead during training exercises, who sent me care packages filled with her famous chocolate chip cookies to every deployment. She was gone. But when I opened the full obituary online, something stopped my heart cold. Alina Marie Hayes is survived by her loving son Robert Hayes, daughter-in-law Patricia Hayes, and grandson Marcus Hayes. She was preceded in death by her husband of 55 years, William Hayes. I read it again, then again. My name wasn't there. Lieutenant Colonel Rebecca Hayes, her granddaughter who had spent every summer at her house, who had called her every Sunday for the past 15 years, who had just returned from Syria where I'd risked everything to save 47 soldiers. I had been erased. Completely. As if I had never existed. The paper airplane she taught me to fold sat on my desk back in my quarters, yellowed with age but perfect in its simplicity. She had written on its wing in her careful cursive, "For my little pilot, fly high, sweetheart. Grandma believes in you." That plane had traveled with me to Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and back. It was my talisman, my reminder that someone somewhere thought I was worth believing in, but apparently not worth remembering. I closed my eyes and could hear her voice from 15 years ago, the day I told her I was applying to the Air Force Academy. My mother, Patricia, had screamed. My father, Robert, had threatened to disown me, and my older brother, Marcus, had called me a fool. But Grandma Alina had taken my hands in her weathered ones and whispered, "Real eagles fly alone, sweetheart. They don't need the flock's permission." The memory felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Eagles fly alone. Maybe she'd been preparing me for this moment all along. My squadron commander, Colonel Martinez, found me 20 minutes later, still staring at the screen. "Hayes, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." "My grandmother died," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I need emergency leave for the funeral." He studied my face with the concern of a man who'd seen too many of his pilots return from missions carrying invisible wounds. "Of course, take all the time you need. When's the service?" "Tomorrow afternoon. Cedar Falls, Iowa." I paused, the words bitter on my tongue. "If they let me attend." "What do you mean, if they let you?" I showed him the obituary. His expression darkened as he read. Colonel Martinez was a 28-year veteran who'd flown F-16s in Desert Storm. He understood what family rejection meant to a soldier. "Jesus, Hayes, I'm sorry." I closed the phone and stood up, my flight suit crisp and professional. Outside, the Nevada desert stretched endlessly under a star-filled sky. Somewhere in that darkness, other pilots were flying training missions, preparing for battles they might never fight. I envied them their certainty. "Sir, permission to speak freely." "Always. They can erase my name from their papers, but they can't erase what I've done, what I've sacrificed." I looked out at the runway where my F-35 waited, its stealth technology invisible to enemy radar, but somehow not invisible enough to make my own family see me. I'm going to that funeral, not because I need their permission, but because I need to say goodbye to the one person who never stopped seeing me. Colonel Martinez nodded slowly. "Bring her home with honor, Rebecca." As I walked toward my quarters to pack my dress blues, one thought echoed in my mind. Grandma Alina had always said that real eagles fly alone. Tomorrow, I would find out just how alone I really was. But eagles, I reminded myself, are also hunters, and sometimes they circle back. The flight from Nevada to Cedar Rapids felt like crossing into enemy territory. I sat in my dress blues, the distinguished flying cross catching the airplane's overhead light, a reminder of missions my family would never know about. Maple Grove Funeral Home sat on the edge of Cedar Falls like a monument to small-town respectability. Cars lined the street for 3 blocks. I parked my rental car at the far end, away from the vehicles I recognized from my childhood. The moment I walked through the front doors, conversations stopped. Heads turned. Whispers followed in my wake. My mother, Patricia Hayes, stood near the guest registry in a black dress, her perfectly styled hair pulled back severely. When she saw me, her lips pressed into a thin line. Rebecca. My name sounded like a curse. I didn't think you'd come. She was my grandmother, too. Was she? According to the obituary, Eleanor only had one grandchild, the one who didn't embarrass the family by playing soldier. Playing soldier. 16 years of service, 2 Bronze Stars, and 43 combat missions reduced to playing soldier. Where do I sign in? You don't. She stepped between me and the registry. This is a private service for family only. You chose that lifestyle over your real family. My brother Marcus appeared like he'd been summoned, heavier now, wearing an expensive suit. His eyes slid over me without recognition. I'm sorry, do I know you? This is a private service. The performance was calculated, deliberately cruel. It's me, Marcus, Rebecca, your sister. I don't have a sister in the military. My family consists of respectable people who contribute to society in meaningful ways. An elderly woman looked confused. But I thought Eleanor always talked about her granddaughter, the pilot. She was confused in her final years. Patricia cut her off. Dementia. She sometimes invented people who didn't exist. The lie was so audacious that several people nodded sympathetically. Grandma Eleanor, sharp as a tack until she died, reduced to a confused old woman imagining granddaughters. I felt something cold settle in my chest, the same feeling when enemy radar locked onto my aircraft. I'll sit in the back, I said quietly. You'll sit in your car, Patricia hissed. This family has endured enough shame without you parading around in that costume. The funeral director approached nervously. Is there a problem? No problem, Marcus said smoothly. Just explaining to this young lady that she's at the wrong service. I looked toward the casket where Grandma Eleanor lay surrounded by white roses. They'd kept her quilt with tiny airplanes but erased the granddaughter. 5 minutes. Just let me say goodbye. Absolutely not. Security, escort this person out. 2 men in suits moved toward me. The entire room watched this drama play out over my grandmother's casket. I could have fought, could have shown my military ID, told them exactly who I was and what I'd done for this country. Instead, I straightened my shoulders and walked toward the door with measured military pace. Eagles choose their battles. As I reached the exit, my mother's voice carried. Some people never learn their place in the world. She was right. I was about to learn exactly what my place was, and it wasn't in the back row of anyone's theater. I sat in my rental car outside the funeral home, my hands gripping the steering wheel like flight controls. The humiliation burned in my chest, but underneath it was something else, a memory fighting its way to the surface. Some people never learn their place in the world. My mother's words echoed, but they were quickly drowned out by another voice, a gentler one, weathered by age and sweetened by unconditional love. Your place, sweetheart, is wherever your wings can take you. I was 8 years old again, standing in Grandma Eleanor's kitchen on a humid Iowa summer morning. She was teaching me to fold paper airplanes while my parents argued in the living room about my father's business troubles. The familiar sound of their raised voices had sent me running to the one place in the house where storms never reached. Watch carefully, little pilot, Grandma Eleanor had said, her arthritic fingers moving with surprising precision as she creased the white paper. The secret isn't in making it perfect. The secret is in believing it will fly. She had handed me the plane, and I'd run to the back door, launching it into the summer air. It soared over her vegetable garden, caught an updraft, and disappeared over the fence into the Johnsons' yard. It flew away. I'd cried, devastated. "No, sweetheart," she'd said, pulling me close. "It found where it belonged. Real eagles fly alone, Rebecca. They don't need the flock's permission." Even then, she'd understood something about me that my parents never would. The memory shifted, fast-forwarding through summers of building model airplanes on her kitchen table, nights spent stargazing on her back porch while she told me stories about my grandfather's service in Korea. She was the one who'd driven me to the library to check out books about military aircraft. She was the one who'd bought me my first flight simulator game when I turned 12. And when I was 17, standing in that same kitchen with my acceptance letter to the Air Force Academy trembling in my hands, she was the one who'd believed. "They'll never forgive me," I'd whispered, listening to my parents' furious voices down the hall. "Mom says I'm throwing my life away. Dad says I'm abandoning the family." Grandma Alina had taken the letter from my hands, reading it with tears in her eyes. "Oh, my little pilot, look at you, look what you've become. They hate it, they hate me. They are afraid," she'd corrected gently. "People fear what they don't understand. Your parents see safety in small dreams, sweetheart, but you..." She'd cupped my face in her weathered hands. "You were born for big skies." That night, she'd given me the quilt she'd been working on for months, hand-stitched with tiny airplanes along the border, each one unique, each one soaring toward something greater. "Promise me something," she'd said as she tucked it around my shoulders. "Promise me you'll fly as high as your wings will take you. And when you're up there, when you're touching the clouds, remember that your old grandma is watching. I'll be the wind beneath your wings." 4 years later, when I graduated from the academy, my parents hadn't come. Marcus had been too busy with college. But Grandma Alina was there in the front row, her eyes shining with pride as I received my commission. She'd driven 6 hours by herself, despite her arthritis, despite her failing eyesight, despite my mother's protests. My granddaughter, the officer, she'd whispered when I'd found her after the ceremony. "Your grandfather would be so proud." She'd kept every newspaper clipping about my promotions, every photo I'd sent from deployment. Her refrigerator was a gallery of my military career commendations, squadron photos, pictures of me standing next to F-35s in hangars around the world. The last time I'd seen her was 3 months ago on leave between deployments. She was frailer then, moving slowly through the house that seemed too big for her, but her mind was sharp, her love unchanged. "I may not understand all this military business," she'd said, settling into her favorite chair while I made us tea. "But I understand courage, Rebecca. I understand sacrifice, and I'm proud of the woman you've become. The family doesn't see it that way. The family sees fear where they should see strength. But that's not your burden to carry, little pilot." She'd reached for my hands, her skin paper-thin but her grip surprisingly strong. "You fly your own course, promise me." I'd promised, just like I'd promised to fly high, to touch the clouds, to remember she was watching. Now, sitting outside her funeral, banned from saying goodbye, I understood what she'd been preparing me for all along. Not just to fly alone, but to soar without their approval, to find my worth in something bigger than their small, bitter world. I pulled out my phone and opened the photos. There she was, standing beside my F-35 during a base visit 2 years ago, her face glowing with wonder as I explained the aircraft's capabilities. The proudest moment of my life hadn't been earning my wings or receiving commendations. It had been seeing my grandmother touch the wing of my fighter jet and whisper, "My little pilot grew up to touch the stars." The funeral home doors opened, and mourners began filing out. The service was over. I'd missed my chance to say goodbye, but maybe that was okay. Maybe some conversations happen in the clouds. As the mourners dispersed into the Iowa afternoon, watching them reminded me of another day, another crowd, another moment when my family had made their position crystal clear. It was 8 years ago, the Air Force Academy graduation ceremony at Falcon Stadium. 10,000 people in the stands, the Thunderbirds roaring overhead, and me standing with my class, about to receive our commissions as officers. I'd sent the invitation 6 months earlier, a formal card with the Academy crest, including a personal note. "I hope you'll be there to see me become an officer. It would mean everything to me." The response came in a phone call from my mother that still echoed in my memory. "Rebecca, we've discussed this as a family. We won't be attending your ceremony." "Mom, it's my graduation from the Air Force Academy." Exactly. The word landed like a slap. "Do you understand what you've done to this family?" The Hayes family has always been respectable. We run businesses, we contribute to the community. We don't send our daughters off to play war. "I'm not playing anything, I'm serving my country." "You're embarrassing us. Your father's business associates are asking questions. The country club members are whispering. Why couldn't the Hayes family control their daughter?" "Mom, I'm going to be a pilot." "You're going to be a killer. That's what soldiers do, Rebecca. They kill people, and no daughter of mine is going to become that." Marcus had taken the phone then, his voice carrying condescending wisdom. "Look, sis, we're trying to protect you. Dad's already had to explain to his clients why his daughter is at some military school instead of a real college." A real college? The Air Force Academy is one of the most prestigious institutions in the country. For people who don't have other options. You had options, Rebecca. You chose to throw them away. What options? To work in Dad's office, to marry someone from the country club, to be normal, to be part of this family instead of some government experiment. The conversation ended with my father's tired, final voice. "Rebecca, you made your choice. We've made ours. We won't be there." So graduation day came with an empty section where my family should have been. Grandma Aliner had driven down alone, 6 hours with arthritic hands because she refused to fly. She sat in the front row, tears streaming as I raised my right hand and took the oath of office. "I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic." After the ceremony, while classmates celebrated with families, Grandma Aliner and I had dinner at a quiet restaurant off base. She held my new lieutenant's bars like they were precious metal. "They don't understand," she'd said simply. "They think courage is something you can control, something you can choose not to have." Sometimes I wonder if they are right, if I should have stayed, tried to be what they wanted. And what would that have made you? Safe, acceptable, normal, and miserable. She reached across the table. "Rebecca, I've lived 79 years. I've seen people try to make themselves smaller to fit into other people's boxes. You know what happens?" "What?" "They disappear. Little by little. They disappear until there's nothing left but an empty shell doing what everyone else thinks they should do." In the years that followed, as I earned my wings, deployed again and again, rose through the ranks, my family's disapproval remained constant. No congratulations for promotions. No inquiries about safety during deployments. No acknowledgement of the ribbons and medals that accumulated on my chest. I was their shame, and they were content to let me remain so. Now, sitting outside Grandma Aliner's funeral, I understood that some battles are lost before they are fought. Some families write you off long before you have a chance to prove your worth. But as I watched the last mourners leave, I also understood something else. The people who truly mattered had never needed proof at all. The irony wasn't lost on me. While my family saw shame in my uniform, the rest of the world saw something entirely different. Something they would never know about, never understand, and certainly never read in any newspaper. 3 months ago, I'd been sitting in the same F-35 Lightning Roman II that now waited for me back at Nellie's, preparing for a mission that didn't officially exist. The briefing had been classified at the highest levels, the kind of operation that gets buried so deep in Pentagon files that it might as well have happened in another dimension. Storm Eagle, this is control. You are cleared for ingress. Package delivery is critical. Do you copy? Control, Storm Eagle copies, inbound to target. The target was a compound in northern Syria where 47 American soldiers and 3 CIA operatives had been trapped for 18 hours. ISIS fighters had them surrounded, and conventional rescue operations had failed twice. The enemy had surface-to-air missiles, heavy artillery, and the high ground. It was supposed to be a suicide mission for any aircraft that attempted close air support. I went in anyway, flying at Mach 1. 2, skimming the desert floor at 50 feet to avoid radar detection, I'd punched through their air defenses like they were made of paper. The F-35 stealth technology and my 8 years of combat experience had turned me into a ghost with teeth. Control, Storm Eagle has eyes on package, multiple hostile positions, beginning attack run. What followed was 12 minutes of precision destruction that military analysts would later call textbook close air support. I'd eliminated 14 enemy positions, destroyed 3 SAM sites, and created an extraction corridor wide enough for the rescue helicopters to reach our people. 47 soldiers came home because I'd been willing to fly into hell and make it rain fire. But the mission was classified. No medals ceremony, no news coverage, no public recognition. Just a simple letter in my personnel file and a brief handshake from a general whose name I wasn't allowed to mention. Outstanding work, Colonel Hayes. Your country is grateful. That was it. 47 lives saved, and the only record was buried in a vault somewhere in Virginia. It wasn't the first time. Over my 16-year career, I'd flown missions in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and Syria. I'd provided close air support for special operations forces whose names were redacted from history. I'd eliminated high-value targets whose deaths were never acknowledged. I'd been shot at, locked onto by enemy radar, and once forced to eject over hostile territory. The Distinguished Flying Cross on my chest represented a mission in Afghanistan where I'd spent 14 hours in the air, refusing to return to base while Marines on the ground were under attack. I'd landed with less than 5 minutes of fuel remaining and burns on my hands from an electrical fire in the cockpit. The Bronze Star came from Iraq, where I'd flown air cover for a convoy under ambush, staying on station despite taking heavy ground fire that damaged my aircraft's hydraulic systems. Each medal represented moments when someone's son or daughter came home instead of coming home in a flag-draped coffin. Each ribbon was a story of Americans who lived because I'd been willing to risk everything to protect them. But my family didn't know any of this. They couldn't know. The missions were classified, the locations were redacted, and the impact was measured in lives saved rather than headlines earned. To them, I was still just playing soldier. The only person who'd understood was Grandma Alina. She'd never asked for details about my deployments, never pressed me for stories I couldn't tell. But she'd look at my face when I came home on leave, see something in my eyes that others missed. "You've been carrying heavy things, haven't you, little pilot?" She'd say, and somehow that simple acknowledgement meant more than any medal. She'd been the one person who'd never needed to know the specifics to understand the sacrifice. When I'd return from 6-month deployments, exhausted and hollow-eyed, she'd make me sit in her kitchen while she prepared my favorite meal. She'd talk about her garden, the weather, the neighbors' cats, normal things that reminded me there was still a world worth protecting. "Are you okay?" She'd ask quietly, and I'd lie and say yes because that's what we do. We carry the weight so others don't have to. But she'd see through it every time. "Remember, sweetheart," she'd say, squeezing my hand with surprising strength. "Heroes don't get to choose their burdens. They just get to choose how they carry them." Last month, I'd sent her a letter from Nellie's, carefully written to pass military censors. I'd told her about the desert sunsets, about the young pilots I was training, about how the F-35 handled in certain weather conditions. What I couldn't tell her was that I'd just returned from Syria, that I'd saved 47 lives, that I'd once again proven that sometimes one person in the right place can change everything. She'd written back with her usual gentle wisdom. "I may not know where you've been, little pilot, but I know why you went. That's enough for an old grandmother's heart." Now she was gone, and with her went the only person who'd ever understood that some kinds of service happen in the shadows. Some heroism never sees the light of day. Some sacrifices are measured not in applause, but in the quiet knowledge that you did what needed to be done. Sitting outside her funeral, banned from saying goodbye, I thought about those 47 soldiers. They were probably having dinner with their families tonight, watching their children play, living the lives I'd helped preserve. They would never know my name, and that was exactly how it should be. But Grandma Aliner had known, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. But even Grandma Aliner's understanding couldn't bridge the miles between us when duty called. The notification that would change everything came 3 weeks ago while I was in a classified briefing at Nellie's. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Miss Hayes, this is Cedar Falls General. Your grandmother, Aliner Hayes, has been admitted. Please call immediately." I'd stepped out, hands shaking as I dialed. The nurse's voice was gentle but direct. "I'm sorry, Miss Hayes. Your grandmother suffered a massive stroke this morning. She's stable, but she's asking for you. I'll be there in 6 hours. Ma'am, the family has requested that we not contact you. But Mrs. Hayes was very specific. She made us promise to call you directly." Even in her final hours, Grandma Aliner was protecting me, making sure I knew I mattered. But life in the military doesn't pause for personal emergencies. My squadron was deploying in 72 hours, and I was the mission commander. 40 other pilots were depending on my leadership. The choice was impossible. Abandon my duty or miss what might be my last chance to see the only person who'd ever truly believed in me. I'd chosen duty. It's what she taught me to do. For 3 days, I'd carried my phone during every briefing, every training flight, waiting for news, hoping for a miracle, praying she'd hold on. The call came on a Tuesday morning during our final mission briefing. Colonel Martinez answered his phone, listened, then walked over. "Rebecca, you need to take this." The voice belonged to someone from the funeral home, professional, sympathetic, efficient. "Miss Hayes, this is regarding your grandmother, Aliner Hayes. She passed peacefully yesterday evening. She left something for you." My world tilted. While I'd been memorizing target coordinates, the most important person in my life had slipped away. She left something. A letter. She insisted we give it directly to you, not to the family. I'd flown commercial from Nevada to Iowa, that letter burning in my mind. The funeral director handed me a sealed envelope with my name in Grandma Aliner's shaky handwriting. I'd opened it right there in his office. "My dearest little pilot, if you're reading this, then I've gone on ahead to check the weather conditions for your final flight someday. Don't worry, I'll make sure the skies are clear. I know you're probably carrying guilt about not being here. Stop that right now. You were exactly where you needed to be, doing exactly what you were called to do. I've never been prouder. Your grandfather used to watch you building paper airplanes and say, 'That child has the heart of a warrior and the soul of a protector.' He was right, sweetheart. You were born to serve something bigger than yourself. The family won't understand. They never have, and they probably never will. But that's their loss, not yours. You don't need their approval to be extraordinary. I'm leaving you the certainty that you are exactly who you were meant to be. Fly high, my little eagle. I'll be watching from the clouds. All my love always, Grandma Alina. I'd read the letter 3 times before the tears came. She'd known. Even facing death, she'd understood that my absence was not abandonment but duty. She'd forgiven me before I'd even had a chance to ask. Now, sitting outside her funeral from which I'd been banned, I understood something profound. Some goodbye conversations happen in letters. Some love transcends death. Grandma Alina had given me her final gift, not guilt, but grace. And somehow that made all the difference. That grace carried me through the next hour, but it couldn't prepare me for what was about to unfold inside those funeral home walls. Through the large windows, I could see the service beginning. I watched from my car as family and friends took their seats, as the pastor opened his Bible. But it was Marcus who delivered the eulogy that would shatter whatever remained of my connection to the Hayes family. He stood at the podium in his expensive suit, every inch the successful businessman. His voice carried clearly through the chapel's sound system. Alina Hayes was many things to many people, he began. A devoted wife, a loving mother, and a cherishing grandmother to those who brought her joy. I felt my stomach clench. The phrasing was deliberate, surgical. She believed in family values, in tradition, in raising children who would honor the Hayes name through respectable careers. She was blessed to see one grandchild fulfill that promise. One grandchild. The words hit like shrapnel. Grandma Alina often spoke of her pride in seeing our family choose paths of honor found in building communities, in creating businesses, in contributing to society through legitimate, peaceful means. Legitimate, peaceful. The implications were unmistakable. She worried about influences that might lead the young astray, about choices that bring shame rather than pride to a family name. But she believed in redemption, in the possibility that even the most misguided souls might find their way back to respectability. I gripped the steering wheel harder. He was rewriting history, turning Grandma Alina's unconditional love into conditional disappointment. Alina Hayes leaves behind a legacy of dignity. She demonstrated that true strength lies not in aggression or violence, but in quiet courage. She showed us that real heroism happens at home, not in foreign lands where American blood is spilled for causes that bring no honor to our families. Foreign lands. American blood spilled. He was talking about me, about my service, about the 47 soldiers I'd saved. The congregation murmured agreement. People who'd known me as a child were nodding along as my brother systematically erased my existence. We gather today to celebrate Alina's wisdom in distinguishing between true accomplishment and mere spectacle, between genuine service and self-serving displays of aggression. She knew the difference between a grandchild and a disappointment. The silence was deafening. Through the window, I could see my mother dabbing her eyes with what looked like genuine pride. Then Marcus wasn't finished. He had one more knife to twist. Before we conclude, I'd like to read from a letter Grandma Alina left for the family. My heart stopped. Marcus unfolded a piece of paper with theatrical precision. She wrote, "I want my family to remember that true honor comes from living with integrity, from choosing careers that build rather than destroy. I have been blessed with one grandchild who embodies these values. That is enough for any grandmother's heart." The lie was so audacious that for a moment I questioned my own memory. But then I remembered her real letter in my jacket pocket, the one that called me her little pilot, that praised my courage. Marcus had forged this letter. He was using our grandmother's funeral to deliver his final verdict on my life. As mourners filed out, I caught fragments of their conversations. Such a shame about the other granddaughter. Alina tried so hard with that one. Military service isn't always honorable. They were leaving believing that Grandma Alina had died disappointed in me, viewing my service as a betrayal of family values. My brother had stolen not only my place at her funeral, but my place in her heart. He'd rewritten our relationship and painted my grandmother's love as conditional disapproval. I sat in that parking lot understanding that this wasn't just about being excluded from a funeral. This was about having my identity erased, my service vilified, and my relationship with the only person who'd ever loved me turned into a lie. But Marcus had made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed I would slink away quietly, accepting his narrative, disappearing into whatever shadows he thought I belonged in. He'd forgotten that sometimes the storm arrives just when you think the sky is clear. The storm arrived exactly 17 minutes later, announced not by thunder, but by the precise rumble of diesel engines cutting through the Iowa afternoon silence. I was still sitting in my rental car, processing the devastation of Marcus's performance, when the first vehicle appeared at the end of the street. A black SUV with government plates, moving with the purposeful precision that only military convoys possess. Then came the second vehicle, and the third. By the time the small motorcade reached the funeral home, I had counted 5 vehicles total. The lead SUV parked directly in front of the main entrance, and what happened next made my heart skip several beats. 8 members of the United States Air Force Honor Guard stepped out in perfect unison. Their dress blue uniforms were immaculate, their white gloves spotless, their movements synchronized with the precision of a Swiss timepiece. Master Sergeant Williams, whom I recognized from ceremonies at Nellie's, led the formation. The mourners who were still lingering in the parking lot stopped their conversations mid-sentence. Car doors that had been opening froze in place. The entire scene took on the surreal quality of a movie that had suddenly shifted genres. Through the funeral home's large windows, I could see my family inside, frozen in confusion. Patricia's face had gone pale, and Marcus stood at the podium looking like he'd just seen a ghost materialize in broad daylight. Master Sergeant Williams approached my car with the measured pace of a man who had performed this duty countless times. He knocked once on my window, a crisp, military knock that demanded attention. I rolled down the window, my voice surprisingly steady. "Sergeant Williams, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes." His use of my rank was deliberate, carrying across the parking lot like a bell tolling. "We're here for you, ma'am. I'm not sure I understand." His weathered face, marked by 30 years of military service, cracked the slightest smile. "Ma'am, we have orders from the Pentagon. We're here to escort you to your grandmother's service. The family has made it clear." "With respect, Colonel," he interrupted, his voice loud enough for nearby mourners to hear. "We don't take orders from civilians when it comes to honoring our own." And according to our records, Alina Hayes was the grandmother of a decorated combat veteran who has served this nation with extraordinary distinction. The words hung in the air like an artillery barrage. Several mourners had their phones out now, recording everything. Others were already calling friends and family, their excited whispers carrying across the parking lot. "Ma'am," Sergeant Williams continued, "we understand there's been some confusion about your service record. Some people seem to be under the impression that your military career has been unremarkable." I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't a standard honor guard detail. "We're here to correct that misunderstanding." From the lead SUV, another airman emerged carrying a wooden presentation case. Even from a distance, I recognized the distinctive shape and size. My mouth went dry. "Colonel Hayes," Sergeant Williams said, his voice now projecting clearly across the entire parking lot, "by order of the President of the United States and the Secretary of the Air Force, you are directed to accept the Medal of Honor for extraordinary heroism in connection with military operations against an armed enemy." The Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration awarded by the United States government. I had never imagined, never dreamed. The citation reads, Sergeant Williams continued, his voice carrying with parade ground authority, "for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of life above and beyond the call of duty, while serving as pilot in command of an F-35A Lightning Roman II aircraft during combat operations in Syria." My vision blurred. The Syria mission. The 47 soldiers. The mission that wasn't supposed to exist, that was buried so deep in classified files it might as well have been fiction. On 15 March 2024, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, disregarding her own safety and in direct violation of orders to abort the mission, flew repeated attack runs through heavy enemy fire to provide close air support for surrounded American forces. Her actions directly resulted in the successful extraction of 47 military personnel and 3 intelligence operatives. The parking lot had gone completely silent. Even the wind seemed to have stopped blowing. The Medal of Honor ceremony was scheduled to take place next week at the White House. Sergeant Williams continued. However, given the circumstances, the President has authorized this field presentation to ensure that Lieutenant Colonel Hayes receives appropriate recognition at her grandmother's memorial service. Through the funeral home windows, I could see my family standing like statues. Patricia's hand was pressed to her mouth in shock. Marcus had gone completely white, still holding his forged letter like it might somehow protect him from reality. "Colonel Hayes," Sergeant Williams said, stepping back and coming to attention, "would you please step out of the vehicle? We have a ceremony to conduct." As I opened the car door on shaking legs, one thought echoed through my mind. Grandma Aliner had always said she'd be watching from the clouds. Somehow, I had the feeling she'd arranged this weather pattern herself. I stepped out of the rental car on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. The honor guard formed a precise corridor leading from my vehicle to the funeral home entrance, their white gloves gleaming in the afternoon sun like beacons cutting through the surreal haze of this moment. Every eye in the parking lot was on me now. Cell phones were recording from every angle, their cameras capturing what would soon become viral footage of a moment that would redefine everything these people thought they knew about the Hayes family. Master Sergeant Williams opened the presentation case with ceremonial precision. Inside, nestled in blue velvet, lay the Medal of Honor, 5-pointed stars suspended from a light blue ribbon, its simple beauty representing the highest recognition my country could bestow. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sergeant Williams announced, his voice carrying across the parking lot with parade ground authority, "you are about to witness the presentation of the Medal of Honor to Lieutenant Colonel Rebecca Hayes for actions that epitomize the very best of American military service." Through the funeral home windows, I could see my family pressed against the glass like specimens in a display case. Marcus had dropped his forged letter, and it lay forgotten on the podium. Patricia's face had gone through several colors, finally settling on a shade of gray that matched the Iowa sky. The citation, Sergeant Williams continued, unfolding an official document, reads as follows. "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of life above and beyond the call of duty, while pilot in command of an F-35A Lightning Roman II aircraft during combat operations against ISIS forces in northern Syria on 15 March 2024. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Syria, ISIS. These weren't abstract concepts to small-town Iowa. These were the headlines that had dominated their news feeds, the nightmares that kept parents awake worrying about their own children in uniform. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes was tasked with providing close air support for a joint rescue operation. When initial extraction attempts failed and 47 American service members became trapped in an enemy compound, Colonel Hayes was ordered to abort the mission due to overwhelming enemy anti-aircraft defenses. The honor guard stood at attention, while Sergeant Williams's voice painted the scene that had unfolded 8,000 miles from this parking lot. Disregarding direct orders and personal safety, Colonel Hayes made the decision to proceed with the attack alone. Flying at extreme low altitude to avoid enemy radar, she penetrated heavily defended airspace and engaged multiple enemy positions with precision strikes. I remembered that day with crystalline clarity, the radio chatter of trapped soldiers growing more desperate by the hour. The faces of the young airmen in my squadron, knowing they were too green for a mission this dangerous. The calculation that ran through my head, one experienced pilot's life against 47 soldiers who deserved to see their families again. For over 40 minutes, Colonel Hayes flew repeated attack runs through intense ground fire and surface-to-air missile threats. Her aircraft sustained multiple hits, including damage to primary navigation systems and hydraulic controls. The crowd was completely silent now. Even the children had stopped playing, sensing the gravity of the moment. Despite her aircraft's compromised condition, Colonel Hayes continued the attack until all enemy positions were neutralized and a safe extraction corridor was established. Only then did she attempt to return to base, flying a severely damaged aircraft over 300 miles of hostile territory. What Sergeant Williams didn't mention was the fuel leak that had me calculating glide ratios for the last 100 miles, or the fact that I'd landed with less than 2 minutes of fuel remaining and burns on my hands from electrical fires in the cockpit. The rescue operation was completed successfully. All 47 American service members and 3 intelligence operatives were extracted without casualties. Colonel Hayes's actions prevented what military analysts assessed would have been a catastrophic loss of American lives and a significant intelligence breach. As Sergeant Williams finished reading, I noticed that many of the funeral attendees had tears in their eyes. Mrs. Henderson from down the street, who'd always been friendly when I was growing up, was openly weeping. Mr. Johnson, who ran the hardware store where I'd bought supplies for my childhood model airplanes, was standing with his hand over his heart. These people were beginning to understand what my family had refused to see. That military service wasn't about aggression or violence. It was about being willing to sacrifice everything so that others could live free from fear. "It is my honor," Sergeant Williams said, lifting the Medal of Honor from its case, "to present this decoration to Lieutenant Colonel Rebecca Hayes, whose actions exemplify the highest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon herself, the United States Air Force, and our nation." As he stepped forward to place the ribbon around my neck, the weight of the medal felt impossibly light compared to the weight I'd been carrying for years. The weight of my family's disapproval, their shame, their insistence that my service meant nothing. The honor guard snapped to attention and saluted. Without thinking, I returned their salute, and in that moment, I understood something profound. Honor isn't given by family. It's earned by choice, proven by action, and recognized by those who understand its true cost. But the ceremony wasn't over. Sergeant Williams had one more revelation that would complete my family's education. "Colonel Hayes," he said, "there's someone who wanted to ensure you received this recognition today." From the lead SUV, a figure emerged that made my heart stop. Grandma Alina had indeed arranged this weather pattern. She just used channels my family never knew existed. The figure that emerged from the SUV wasn't Grandma Alina. That would have been impossible. But it was the next best thing. General Patricia Morrison, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the highest-ranking woman in the United States military. She moved with quiet authority that only comes from decades of service. Her presence here, at a small-town Iowa funeral, was so unprecedented that several mourners stepped backward in unconscious deference. General Morrison approached with measured steps, her 4 stars catching the afternoon light. When she stopped in front of me, she smiled. "Colonel Hayes, I had the privilege of speaking with your grandmother 3 weeks before she passed." My breath caught. "Ma'am." Alina Hayes called my office directly. "Use channels that most civilians don't know exist. Apparently your grandfather's service in Korea opened certain doors that remained open all these years." The pieces began falling into place. Grandpa Williams' medals, the connections that span generations in military families. "Your grandmother was very specific about her request. She said, 'My granddaughter has been serving in shadows long enough. When I'm gone, I want the world to see what I've always seen, a hero who deserves to stand in the light.'" Tears blurred my vision. Even facing death, Grandma Alina had been orchestrating one final act of love. She provided documentation of your service record that impressed Pentagon analysts. Combat reports, classified mission summaries, testimony from soldiers whose lives you'd saved. She'd been collecting evidence of your heroism for years. From her briefcase, General Morrison withdrew a thick folder. She also provided this, a complete dossier documenting your military career. She'd been maintaining what she called Rebecca's real story since academy graduation. The folder revealed pages of meticulously organized documentation. Photos of me with aircraft, commendations, newspaper articles about missions I couldn't discuss. Grandma Alina had been my unofficial archivist. There's more. She left specific instructions about today. She wanted to ensure that if your family ever attempted to diminish your service or exclude you from honoring her memory, the truth would be revealed in the most public way possible. I looked toward the funeral home, where my family stood frozen behind windows. Marcus had gone pale, still holding his forged letter. Patricia's composed mask had cracked entirely. Your grandmother understood that real love isn't about controlling someone's choices. It's about supporting them unconditionally, even when those choices lead to paths you don't understand. Master Sergeant Williams stepped forward. "Ma'am, if I may. Colonel, my son was one of the soldiers you pulled out of Syria. Staff Sergeant James Williams, 1st Infantry Division." My knees nearly buckled. The young sergeant with the girlfriend's picture in his helmet. "He came home because of you, ma'am. He's getting married next month. When I heard about today, about what your family was doing, there wasn't anywhere else I'd rather be." General Morrison handed me another envelope, sealed with wax. She said to open it after the ceremony, but circumstances call for an exception. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal. Inside was Grandma Alina's careful handwriting. "My dearest little pilot, if you're reading this, then my final plan worked perfectly. I always told you that real eagles fly alone, but I never said they had to land alone. I spent my whole life watching your family fail to see what was right in front of them. They were so busy looking down that they never thought to look up and see you soaring. I made sure that when my time came, Your service would finally receive the recognition it deserves, not because you need their approval, but because the world needs to know what real heroism looks like. Fly high, my little eagle. I'm watching from the clouds and I'm proud. All my love, always and forever, Grandma Aliner. I looked up at General Morrison through tears I no longer tried to hide. She planned all of this. Every detail, the timing, the ceremony, even ensuring that families of soldiers you'd saved would be present. Your grandmother understood that some truths are too important to be buried with their keepers. As if on cue, more vehicles began arriving. Families emerging, some in military dress, others in civilian clothes, all moving with purpose my family couldn't misunderstand. These were people whose lives I'd touched, whose sons and daughters had come home because of missions my family would never know about. Grandma Aliner's final gift wasn't just recognition. It was an entire constellation of witnesses to a truth that could no longer be denied. The constellation of witnesses grew larger by the minute. A young woman in army dress blues approached me with tears streaming down her face. Behind her walked an older couple who carried themselves with the quiet dignity that marks military families. Colonel Hayes. The young woman's voice trembled slightly. I'm Captain Sarah Martinez. You provided air support for our convoy in Afghanistan 2 years ago. My entire unit made it home because of you. Her parents stepped forward. Our daughter wrote to us about a guardian angel pilot who saved her platoon. Her father said, his voice thick with emotion. We never knew her name until today. One by one they came. A Marine sergeant whose evacuation I'd covered in Syria. A Navy corpsman whose field hospital I'd protected during a 3-hour firefight. Parents, spouses, children, all connected by invisible threads to missions my family had dismissed as playing soldier. Through the funeral home windows, I could see my mother and Marcus pressed against the glass, their faces reflecting a dawning horror as they began to understand the magnitude of what they'd tried to erase. The funeral home doors opened, and Patricia emerged first, moving like someone walking through a minefield. Marcus followed, still clutching his forged letter, his expensive suit now looking costume-like among the genuine uniforms surrounding us. Rebecca, my mother began, her voice strained and uncertain. We didn't know. Didn't know what, Mother? I asked quietly. That I was serving my country, that I was saving lives, or that those lives actually mattered. She flinched as if I'd struck her. We thought. The military said your missions were classified. We assumed it was just routine training exercises. You assumed what you wanted to assume. My voice remained steady, but the medal of honor around my neck felt heavier with each word. You never asked about my service because you didn't want to know. You were too busy being ashamed of what you couldn't understand. Marcus stepped forward, his face ashen. Rebecca, if we'd known about all this. You'd have what? I interrupted. Been proud, claimed credit, written different lies about Grandma Aliner's feelings. He dropped the forged letter, and it fluttered to the ground between us like a white flag of surrender. General Morrison moved to stand beside me, her presence a wall of authority that my family couldn't ignore. Mrs. Hayes, Mr. Hayes, I think you need to understand something. Your daughter has spent 16 years serving this nation with distinction. She's flown combat missions that have saved hundreds of American lives. She's earned decorations that most officers never even dream of receiving. She never told us. Patricia stammered. Because you never asked, Captain Martinez said, stepping forward with surprising boldness. Ma'am, with respect, your daughter saved my life and the lives of 23 other soldiers. She flew into enemy fire without hesitation, without orders, because that's what heroes do. More voices joined in, a chorus of testimonies that painted a picture of service my family had refused to see. Each story was another nail in the coffin of their carefully constructed narrative about their disappointing daughter. But it was Master Sergeant Williams who delivered the final blow. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, his voice carrying the weight of 3 decades in uniform. "Your mother, Rebecca's grandmother, called my office last month. She wanted to make sure we understood exactly who we were dealing with. She said, and I'll never forget this, my granddaughter has been carrying the weight of protecting strangers while her own family refuses to see her strength. When I'm gone, I want her to know that someone, somewhere, understands what she's sacrificed." Patricia's composure finally cracked completely. Tears began streaming down her face, but they were tears of shame, not grief. "She knew," my mother whispered. "Alina knew all along what Rebecca was doing, and she knew we." She couldn't finish the sentence. "She knew you were wrong," I said simply. "And she knew that someday you'd have to face that truth." Marcus looked around at the crowd of military families, at the honor guard still standing at attention, at the medal hanging around my neck. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. How do we fix this?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a battlefield. How do you repair 16 years of willful blindness? How do you apologize for erasing someone's existence, for turning their service into shame, for missing every opportunity to simply say, "We're proud of you"? I looked at my family, really looked at them, and saw not the powerful, judgmental figures who had haunted my dreams, but 2 frightened people who had just realized they'd spent years rejecting a hero because she didn't fit their definition of success. "You can't fix this," I said quietly. "You can only choose what happens next." I turned to address the crowd that had gathered, military and civilian alike, all united by their connection to service and sacrifice. My grandmother always said that real eagles fly alone. But she also taught me that sometimes, when you're flying through the darkest storms, you discover that you were never really alone at all. The funeral had become something my family never intended, a celebration of service, a recognition of sacrifice, and a testament to the love of one remarkable woman who had seen the truth when everyone else chose blindness. But most importantly, it had become a choice point for the Hayes family. They could continue living in their small world of comfortable lies, or they could step into the light where truth, however painful, offered the possibility of redemption. The next move was theirs. 6 months later, I stood in the same cemetery where Grandma Alina now rested, but this time I wasn't alone. The granite headstone bore her name in simple, elegant letters, but beneath it was an addition that would have made her smile. Beloved grandmother of Lieutenant Colonel Rebecca Hayes, Medal of Honor recipient. My family had made their choice. Marcus had resigned from his real estate firm and enrolled in a program to support veteran families. It was his way of trying to understand the world he'd spent years dismissing. Patricia had joined the local Gold Star Mothers chapter, despite having no personal loss, because she said she needed to learn what military families actually sacrificed. They would never fully comprehend the weight of what they'd missed, but they were trying. That was enough for now. The Alina Hayes Foundation had broken ground on its first project the week before, a scholarship program for children of fallen service members. The ceremony had been attended by many of the same families who'd appeared at the funeral, creating a different kind of constellation, one built on hope rather than reckoning. "Colonel Hayes." I turned to find a young airman approaching, her dress blues crisp and new. She couldn't have been more than 22, fresh from basic training, her eyes bright with the idealism that military service either nurtures or destroys. "Yes, airman." "Ma'am, I just wanted to say, your story is why I enlisted. When the video of your medal ceremony went viral, when I saw how you stood there with your family behind you and your brothers and sisters in arms beside you, I knew I wanted to serve something bigger than myself. I smiled, remembering another young woman who'd felt the same pull toward the clouds. What's your career field, Airman? Pilot training, ma'am. I want to fly fighters. Her grin was infectious. My grandmother says I'm crazy, but she also says she's proud of me for chasing something that scares other people. Smart grandmother. What's her name? Alina, ma'am. Just like your grandmother. My family says it's a sign. I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, the one that came whenever Grandma Alina's influence reached across the veil between worlds. I think your family might be right, Airman. What's your name? Airman Sarah Chen, ma'am. Well, Airman Chen, let me give you some advice that a very wise woman once gave me. I placed my hand on her shoulder, feeling the weight of mentorship that comes with rank and experience. Real eagles fly alone, but they don't have to land alone. Find your people, trust your training, and never let anyone else define what your service means. She nodded eagerly, then hesitated. Ma'am, can I ask you something? Of course. When you were flying those missions, when you were saving those soldiers, did you ever doubt yourself? Did you ever wonder if you were doing the right thing? The question took me back to countless nights in foreign airfields, to the moments before dangerous missions when fear and duty wrestled in my chest. Every single time, Airman. That's what makes it courage instead of recklessness. Doubt keeps you human. Duty makes you a hero. As she walked away, I turned back to Grandma Alina's headstone. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cemetery, and for a moment, I could almost hear her voice carried on the Iowa wind. Fly high, my little pilot. I'll be watching from the clouds. A year ago, I'd been a nameless colonel whose service existed only in classified files and the memories of soldiers I'd saved. Today, military academies teach case studies based on my missions. Young women like Airman Chen see my story and decide they too can touch the clouds. But the greatest legacy wasn't the medal, or the recognition, or even the foundation. It was the understanding that honor isn't inherited, it's earned. That family isn't just who shares your blood, but who shares your values. That sometimes the most profound act of love is refusing to let someone disappear into the shadows of other people's shame. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice memo app, something I'd started doing during my visits here, a way of keeping Grandma Alina updated on the constellation she'd set in motion. Hey, Grandma, it's me, your little pilot. I wanted you to know, the weather patterns are perfect today. Clear skies, unlimited visibility, and a strong tailwind carrying a new generation toward their dreams. I think you'd be proud of the flight plan. I closed the phone and saluted the headstone, a final gesture of respect for the woman who'd taught me that real strength isn't about fighting against the storm, but about learning to dance with the wind. As I walked back toward my car, I noticed the sky above was painted in shades of gold and crimson, the kind of sunset that makes pilots want to chase the horizon. Somewhere in those clouds, I knew a grandmother was still watching, still believing, still guiding her little pilot home. The flight plan was set. The weather was clear. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't flying alone. If this story touched your heart, if you've ever felt unseen or unappreciated for the service you give to others, know that your story matters too. Honor isn't always recognized immediately, but truth has a way of finding the light. Please share your own moments of recognition or resilience in the comments below. Like this video if Rebecca's journey resonated with you, and subscribe to Honor Vindicated for more stories of courage, family, and the unbreakable bonds that connect those who serve. Until next time, keep flying high. Someone is always watching from the clouds, believing in your strength even when you can't see it yourself.